Welcome to Sailing Avanti. We are Gerard and Jacqueline, sailing our 41-foot monohull Avanti around the world from Cape Town, South Africa. In this episode, we say goodbye to Antigua and start heading further south to the island of St Lucia. It's about a 220 nautical mile sail from Antigua.
We are almost on our way to St Lucia. We have an afternoon departure, so I'm quickly going to cook up dinner for the next 2 nights. It's about a 2-night sail, 2 overnights. But we found some really good priced chicken. So this humongous breast is about 500 grams or 1 point something pounds. I've never seen a chicken breast this size, and the price is actually really good. We think it was a typo. Half the packaging said 15 EC a pound, and then the ones that we snatched only said 5 something EC a pound. So I think we bought the wrong the wrong label, but when it's available at such a cheap price, we bought all the packaging we could.
We have just left Antigua, Jolly Harbour, so we're on our way to St Lucia. We've got some winds on our back, so we're on a broad reach. So hopefully it stays this way. The swell is not that bad, and we're doing about 5 to 6 knots. We've got 2 reefs in the mainsail just for the night. We left at about just before 5 in the afternoon, so that we can get there early morning on Friday morning. It's Wednesday afternoon at the moment, and our Genoa is also out, so very comfortable sailing. We've got our inner forestay up as usual for extra support on the mast, as well as the windward running backstay just for an in case. We're sailing on a broad reach at the moment, and I like to put on a boom preventer more often than not. It just prevents the boom from slamming over when you accidentally jibe. So as soon as we even on a wide beam reach, I would put on the preventer. So it's attached to the end of the boom, and I take it forward to a block on the tow rail, and then back to the cockpit, just to a cleat, so that if you have to jibe, it's not tied on the bow of the boat or something like that. You can control the line from the cockpit and let it fly if you have to. But also, sometimes if there's a man overboard and you have to jibe quickly, some people have not been able to jibe because of the preventer, and they've lost somebody at sea. So that's why I bring it back to the cockpit, so that you can just control it easily. We're about 60 nautical miles from St Lucia, and we did expect some rain, but there's some rain clouds building now, so we are preparing to be hit by quite a big squall. So hopefully not too bad, but we're reducing sail area quickly. With the squall approaching and the sun about to set, we bring in our fishing lines. We don't like to leave out our fishing lines at night, or for in case we have to start the motor and maneuver to prevent them from being caught in the sail drive. We also put on our harnesses before the bad weather hits to make sure that when it hits us, we don't fall overboard. We've got some strong points where we hang on our lanyards inside the cockpit, or we hang on to the jack stays that run all the way from the stern to the bow if we have to walk to the bow on the deck.
Safe! In the end, it looked a lot worse than it was, and we only had a little bit of rain.
We are at last approaching St Lucia Island. It was a bit of a mixed bag sail from Antigua. It started out quite nicely with a broad reach and good wind and good swell, and it kept that way for maybe half a day. Then the wind changed to be more from on the beam or a little bit on the bow, and we had some beating into big swell, which wasn't great, but then the sea calmed down in the lee of the islands and the beating wasn't too bad until we hit Guadeloupe, where we had quite a big lull in the lee and we had to motor for about 3 hours just to get through that. And after that the wind set in nicely and we were beating in calm waters again. It was just before St Lucia where we started struggling quite a bit. The wind changed to a southeasterly, which is the summer winds in the Caribbean. So it makes it difficult to head south and east if the wind is coming from southeast. We did expect that and we expected to beat into it. But as soon as we changed our course just after Martinique to St Lucia, we saw that we just couldn't make any ground towards St Lucia when we tried to tack into the wind. And it was strange. Once we tacked, we just changed 180 degrees of direction. And in the end, we figured out that there was a very strong current against us. So the current runs here quite seldom that strong. And we reckon we had a 2-knot current against us. So that just pushed us back when we tried to beat. And yeah, we had to start motor sailing. So we've been motor sailing also against the wind and against that current for the last almost 12 hours, and we will reach St Lucia soon. So we didn't plan to motor that much, but yeah, unfortunately we just couldn't go into that current. So but we're here and it's good to be here.
This volcanic island can be identified by almost any sailor that has sailed in the Caribbean due to the famous pitons that we'll visit on another episode. Upon arrival, we met some South Africans living on St Lucia, and they invited us to join them with a local hiking group to walk the Esperance Bay on the northern windward side of the island. It's currently the start of spring, and one can see that these islands are desperately waiting for the rainy season that we are trying to avoid. Guavas, mangoes and passion fruit are among the juicy colourful fruit you can see growing in St Lucia. The tropical climate and rich fertile soil means there are plenty of coconut trees and pineapple plants behind the beaches and by the roadsides. Walking the beach, we found this green jelly-like things growing on the rock. If you know what it is, please let us know.
It feels like jelly. Yeah.
The major cultivated crops in St Lucia are bananas, coconuts, cacao, citrus, mangoes and root crops such as cassava, sweet potatoes and yams. And it's estimated that there's about 12,000 hectares of agricultural land in St Lucia. Along this part of the coast, we also saw plenty of sticks in the water, and these are used for farming sea moss. How? I have no clue. But the sea moss is considered a superfood that's used in teas and gels to add to other meals. When we researched this island, we read about its tall trees, amazing bird life and rainforest. And this looked nothing like what we expected. That being said, we've only been here a few days. But it was also voted the honeymoon destination of 2019, and we just couldn't see it. This land was so barren. But our new friends told us to be patient. As we make our way down south, we will soon see why this island is loved by so many. Rodney Bay is where we're anchored, just outside the marina, about 1 nautical mile or 2 kilometers to the dinghy dock. We prefer to anchor as there's no per night fee on top of the cruising permits we pay upon arrival. This marina was the creation of a Californian in the early 1980s that saw the potential of the Mangroves Lagoon and built one of the best equipped yachting centers of the Caribbean, also known as the finishing point of the annual ARC, which is the Atlantic Rally for cruisers. On the banks of the channel that connect the bay with the marina, we found many fishing boats as well as marine shops and services. This bay is full of surprises, and Gregory and his floating fruit shop is no different. The rules of physics most definitely do not apply to his boat, and how the shop moves, let alone floats, will remain a mystery. You cannot miss him. His friendliness is electrifying, and although his fruit is a tad more expensive, it is delivered to your boat, thus completely understandable.
We at the Antilia craft brewery today in St Lucia. It's the only one they have on the island, and it's at the tasting room is at the cruise ship terminal. There's no cruise ships today, so we have to taste some beer. They have quite a few beers on tap, and the first one we try is the Golden Wheat Lager and the Passion Fruit Ale. The Golden Wheat Lager is a clear and crispy lager with a bit of a malty taste, and it's really nice and refreshing and scores an 8 out of 10. Jacqueline got stuck on the Passion Fruit Ale, but we won't score that as it's not a real beer. Next one is the Formidable IPA. It's their flagship beer, so let's see how it tastes. This IPA is very fruity and refreshing and scores a 7 out of 10 for an IPA. The last beer we're tasting here at the Antilia craft brewery is the Chocolate Stout. As you can see, it's very dark and it's got a very stouty taste, so nice craft stout. We don't know what the cost is, we'll inform you later, but very nice beer, and I would rate it probably 8 out of 10.
We jump in the public van in Castries and head further south. It was time to find the main ingredient for all the famous rum punches. So we're in the center of St Lucia at the moment. We really aren't scared of taking local buses and just seeing where the path takes us. So we don't really know how we're gonna get back to Rodney Bay, but we're gonna taste some rum and then we'll walk next to the main road and find our way back. It's part of the adventure.
We visit St Lucia Distillery, the only rum distillery on the island. We take a tour through the distillery before we taste the 25 different rums that they make. Here you can see the fermentation process taking place. Molasses is mixed with hot water and yeast and allowed to ferment to form alcohol and CO2. They have different pot stills in the factory, 2 from copper and 1 from stainless steel. The different metals creates a different taste to the rum. The rum from the fermenting process only has 8% alcohol content and is then distilled to increase the alcohol content up to 85%. Distilled water is added to the rum in the end to obtain the desired alcohol content. The rum is then aged in old Jack Daniel's whiskey barrels that gives color and flavor to the rum. The aging process can be between 2 and 12 years, and as the aging process goes on, the rum gets darker and darker. Spices are then added to the rums and all sorts of flavors to create the well-known spiced rums and coconut rums, for instance. They also have creamy rum liqueurs with lower alcohol content, named after one of the bays in St Lucia, Marigot Bay. So this is the peanut creamer. Let's try it. Surprisingly, they have an unlimited tasting of their 25 rums in the tasting room after the tour. So I make sure I spend quite a lot of time here making sure we only select and buy the best of rums. Jacqueline tries to avoid the rum tasting because she needs to make sure that we get back to Avanti before sunset with the public transport system.
Just before we leave, we're able to walk through a hall that they've decorated with the colours and history of Carnival that'll be hosted in July this year. It looks stunning. Thank you for watching this week's episode. And remember, a free way to help us is to simply like, share, comment or subscribe to these videos. Next week, we set up sails and head south to see what more St Lucia has in store for us.